Toros. Two picadors on horseback flanked Count Fernandez. The picadors wore leg armour beneath their smartly coming outfits, while horses had been mattressed against the horns of the bull ever since 1928. Traditionally, the Count wore a smaller cape for the first act, or feiner, which gave the impression of heightening the risk. Together they took a lap, voletta and bow of honour across the spectators and towards the judge's box as the orchestra started up the mandatory paso doble. As it ended, the picadors retreated from the ring. The bugler heralded the first feiner. The bull entered the ring from the toril, wearing a rosetta of ranch colours. This specimen was chestnut-coloured, serious-looking with rings around the eyes, partridge-eyed, with thick wide horns of a forward set. Cornea del Tiro. He was here as the matador to undertake a serious job of work, to kill. The animal was disorientated by the spectacle of the occasion. In all cases, the bull experiences his first and last bullfight, thus adding to confusion and anger of the beast. In necessary and humane cases, bulls are retained for stud purposes. Count Fernandez received a further bow of applause and unclipped a large leather case enclosing swords and maletas. "Witness the tools of death," he shouted. A red cloth, known as cinters, was wound around the sword by the handle. On seeing the Count posing statuesquely with the muletto, the bull snorted disapproval and almost subconsciously dug into the freshly evened sand. Correctly assuming his survival was at stake, in front of a large group of unfamiliar people, it was apparent what had to be done and who against. This elicited a response from the spectators, who gave the impression to the bull that they shared the same attitude. Encouraged, he snarled and prepared his aranada, attack. The bull made a single pass charge for the muletto, but swept past in his single-minded intent. He had been seriously wrong-footed and drove some way across the ring. Turning around to see Count Fernandez acknowledging spectators with considerable aplomb, the bull vowed to teach him a bitter lesson. He pawed the ground, then backed up before charging again. Count Fernandez demonstrated his skills with the capote, typically coloured magenta and yellow. He performed the archetypal two-handed cape pass known as the Veronica, sidestepping the beast with the capote held to one side behind his back. The bull overshot, coming up short of the toril and kicking up his heels. Swinging round, his eyes transfixed on the Count's long, thin fingers, which pointed inwards. The animal roared defiantly. Count Fernandez began to test the bull to see how he charged. It was imperative to gauge behaviour quickly, training him to follow the lure, from which this sinister dance with death would commence in a series of contrasting moves between the two. Like a ballet or ice rink, the movements could be single gestures or a fluid series of connected strokes. He performed a pass invented by Chicalo, in which the capote is pulled in tight against the body. "Maestro!" clapped Erotica. Amid further applause from the spectators, Count Fernandez ran backwards from the centre of the ring. The bull returned truculently to the al sesgro, the zone of the ring where he felt most secure. The picadors entered the ring. The horses stiffened back as their riders flicked the top of their erect lances, known as picas. The point of the weapons glinted in the sunlight. At the base of the pua was a wooden shaft or tope wrapped in cord. The bull made directly for one of the horses, but was held at bay by the threat of the lancers. It is a picador's task to pierce the bull's strong neck muscle with the lance. The effect is clearly to disadvantage the animal in the face of sustained attack from the matador. Destroy its capacity to defend itself against the killer blow. In the event, they pricked unsuccessfully at the cruise, the highest part of the bull's neck. The bugler, positioned in the judge's box, ushered the picadors from the ring. End of part 1. Following the interval, the bugler announced the second feiner. Allowing the length of time it took for the Count to appear, it was clear Fernandez was saving himself for the third and last feiner. The picadors were the primary antagonist in this portion of the corrida, and they had a clear action to execute, the placing of the banderillas. The bull made a welcome reappearance, but the sudden onslaught of the picadors from either direction divided his attention. Picador 1's lance grazed the bull's forehead, despite the beast trying to knock the weapon from his hand. The rider managed to withdraw it, but not without unsettling his own position on the horse. The bull saw this and scared the horse, which reared alarmingly, dismounting its rider. "Cader!" exclaimed Fernandez backstage with dismay, as the picador landed in the cradle between the bull's horns. The animal made several sudden movements to dislodge the unwelcome appendage. An upward thrust of his head, derote, and the picador was tossed into the air with a wounded backside. "Atropellado!" cried Erotica, referring to the term used for trampling. The spectators whistled, jeered and booed, as white handkerchiefs and cushions were thrown into the ring. A savage goring was avoided when Picador 2's lance made a short, sharp, incisive entry into the bull's neck muscle. The animal did no more than irritably push it away as the first picador crawled uncomfortably off the ring, to be replaced with Picador 3. The bull reorientated himself remarkably quickly, sometimes too quickly, pleasing the spectators at the expense of its own tactical advantage. While continuing to perform to full effect, he now experienced pain and the sense all was not as well as prior to entering the ring. Again, the picadors braced themselves for the bull to come at them again. Picador 3 negotiated it more skillfully, manoeuvring the bull at an angle between himself and his colleague. The animal did not see Picador 2 thrust a pica directly into a hump of muscle, the Murillo, on top of his neck. The picador twisted the lance in a drilling action in order to deepen the wound to the bull. There was a metal ring on the shaft of the pica, called the arandella, that prevented it from plunging in too deep. A straight kill would be no good from either an artistic or entertainment perspective. Picador 2 retracted the lance, and the bull drove gamely back to the far side of the ring, apparently ready for the next beat. Now both picadors produced the banderillos, harpoon darts, 75 centimetres long. They immediately caught the bull's eye with their individually and brilliantly coloured strips of paper. By now, the wounds to the bull's neck were beginning to sting and affect movements of the head. An element of trepidation crept into his mentality, though fatigue was some way off. There was another difference now too. Not content to wait for the bull's onslaught, the picadors now invaded that part of the ring once deemed his personal domain. They waited until they had met the bull head-on, poda a poda, then hurled the banderillo simultaneously at him. Picador 2 missed, while Picador 3 successfully targeted the bull's neck and shoulders with the banderillos, enforcing extra weight and reducing mobility. This all but stopped him hooking his horns from left to right, greatly restricting latitude. Picador 3 trotted nonchalantly down the ring, his job done. As the bull spent precious energy in several furious endeavours to displace the banderillos, to no avail, they were secure. Picador 2 dismounted and set to with a puntilla, a small dagger, to intensify their advantage. With the bull unable to raise his head, the picador thrust his hand out expressively. His colleague also dismounted and stepped forward in similar fashion. There were cries of discontent from one or two spectators, one of whom called out "Bergenazo," a safe but unfair sword move to the bull's neck. The picadors returned to their horses and withdrew. The bull, in some distress, saw that his tormentors were gone and righted flailing limbs, only to face Count Fernandez once again, who, to distinguish himself from his entourage of picadors wearing chaquetilla, sported the charged de luces variation of the matador's suit of lights. The proceedings of the Faina, the third and final act, are conducted like theatre, to the strains of the Pasodoble by the Plaza Orchestra. Critics argue that the gaudiness is used to deliberately offset the bitter taste of death. First there is a desplant, or sitar, in which the bull is particularly taunted by the matador to attack him. Count Fernandez mocked the bull, weak from persistent injury and weighed down by the banderillos, though still a force to be reckoned with, then turned his back dismissively, which elicited the desired response. With eyes seemingly in the back of his head, the Count swung apart at the last second, keeping well away from the horns as the bull swept heavily past. Count Fernandez was in the sunny side of the ring. Across in the sombre shade, he saw the bull run to a dead halt. There comes a point when the bull's increasing sense of public shame in seeing off the jackanapes prompts mistakes. Well into his stride, Count Fernandez performed a bewildering array of passes. The greater the art, the greater the humiliation of the bull before its conqueror. He swirled the muletto in a figure of 8 right in front of the bull's face, but encountered the matador's second greatest enemy, the wind. Hooves raised, the bull tore the muletto from the Count's hand. He stepped back as the bull exploited its surprise by delivering a blow to his back. Count Fernandez righted himself to polite applause, the kind awarded to an also-ran. He didn't hear it very often. So, and sin vergüenza, cursed erotica under her breath. To save face, Count Fernandez gathered the cape in one hand and flung it out for the bull's attention. He spun around in a manner that would not have ashamed an ice skater, eyes and teeth ablaze with triumph, as the animal's horns passed by once again. The bull turned wearily and came to a stop, kicking up his heels in a disheartened fashion. It bore witness to an exchange between Count Fernandez and the presiding judge, in which the matador ritualistically traded in the large ceremonial sword for a real estoque one. The Count had just formally requested permission from the judge to kill it. As permission was granted and the weapon exchanged, a look of fear came into the bull's eyes for the first time. No matter what the pain, burden or encroaching tiredness, he had to destroy his attacker, or it would surely destroy him. Count Fernandez and the bull ran to meet each other in the centre with deadly earnest. The bull directed the beating of his horns as best he could. Meanwhile, the Count performed the dangerous salto di garrocha, in which he pole vaulted over the beast. Even now, in middle age, he could still do it. He reckoned he always would, ignoring the cries of protest from his family, which grew longer and more tiresome with each subsequent bullfight. "Bravo!" roared the crowd. This sentiment was short-lived, as the bull delivered a further strike with the flat of its horn, paletazo. There was a sudden shudder from the spectators as the Count's hand went up to the right side of his face. Even the bull seemed to pause. When the hand was dramatically lowered, a large gash predominated the right cheek of Count Fernandez. Count Fernandez brought out a handkerchief and a small compact mirror and wiped the blood away in a single terse brush motion. Plastic surgery aside, his right cheek would bear witness to the afternoon's events, a livid, jagged scar for the rest of his life. On reflection, he preferred it that way. It was a mantle-bearer of courage. Rather than be angered or incensed, he appeared proud. "Fracaso," complained Erotica. She would have to live with it. The bull stared at his handiwork and, avoiding a perpendicular sword thrust of 90 degrees, made for the favoured spot, the groin. In counter-reaction, Count Fernandez performed a low pass, the Plaza por Bajar, which had the effect of lowering the bull's head. The ultimate target zone of a bull is a hand-sized area between the shoulder blades. Done well, the bull expires to the matador's stylistic gratification in no more than a few minutes. That is important, as for many, the death of the bull can rob the theatre of any semblance of artistic merit, proving it has all been camouflage for a merciless act. A matador who does not kill quickly and cleanly is not best regarded by a Spanish crowd or his judge. In America, the contests are bloodless. By law, the bull is not killed at all. Count Fernandez leant over quickly and plunged the estoque sword halfway in, the medio estacada, appeasing fans of the creature and satisfying artistic requirements. The bull was surprised it could move and feel much as before, when the Count drove the weapon home all the way, executing Descalabrar, thereby killing it. Count Fernandez looked down on blood dripping from his sword back onto the expanding abscess of the slain animal. He removed his Montero hat and placed it reverentially on the ground beside the deceased bull. The action reflected the removal of military caps at a funeral service. The guide translated to spectators that the Count had just dedicated the life of the animal to the entire arena. There was speculation that, had the bull not struck Fernandez, the level of resistance it had otherwise put up would have resulted in a plea to save its life. Count Fernandez threw his blooded handkerchief into the ring and his hands up, to great public acclaim. The president of the bull ring and his assessor conferred. Taking their bearings from the jubilant spectators, they announced they were going to award 2 ears and the tail of the slaughtered bull to the victor, in line with a considered degree of eloquence to his work. "Tremendista!" shouted the spectators. Count Fernandez performed another lap of honour around the ring. He stood on a dais and accepted the microphone from a television presenter. "I have no intention of cutting the pigtail and retiring from the ring," he was eager to confirm. "This is no despedada," farewell performance. With that, the Count was hoisted aloft the shoulders of the spectators all the way to the exit. Given this bravura performance, he had some way to go. Costumed ring servants known as Monsalbios and the Picadors orchestrated a team of mules to drag the dead bull from the ring. 5 years on, Count Fernandez touched the jagged scar and smiled. His reverie was broken by the arrival of a large sonic aircraft nearing his castle home.